We are living in an increasingly interconnected world, with 4.66 billion people connected to each other by the internet. We pay each other, share data, and communicate with each other within seconds. Everything seems great, right? Well, I hate to break the news. All that is a lie. The truth is, we are not connected with each other. Instead, we are connected to centralized multinational companies and data merchants who we are forced to trust with everything we do. Sounds like a bad dream, right? Well, it's the reality most people are living in. Today, I'm going to talk about why the future is a decentralized one and how the transition from centralized platforms to decentralized ones is going to be the most profound and disruptive change we've seen in our lifetimes. All that is to help you understand the shortcomings of the centralized world we live in right now and to help you prepare for the future. Before we get into all of this, I do need to make a few things clear. Although I have amassed a small fortune by working as a stunt double for Colin Firth, that does not make me a financial advisor. So that means that everything in this video is for entertainment and educational purposes only. With that bombshell about my past out of the way, I want to give a warm welcome to anyone new to the channel. Howdy and welcome to the Bureau. This channel is your resource for the best crypto insights, reviews, and news. If any of that sounds like something you're interested in, then sign up to Team Coin Bureau for free by firmly tapping that subscribe button and flicking that notification bell. Do that, and those fine folks at YouTube will let you know whenever I release another video. And one final thing, I've provided some useful timestamps below. That's been done to make it easy for you to skip ahead to the section that interests you the most. Okay, ready to hear how decentralization is about to disrupt everything? Strap yourselves in. To kick things off, I should briefly explain what the heck decentralization means. In short, it is the transfer of control and decision-making from a centralized entity, an individual, organization, government, or company, to a distributed network. Those decentralized networks reduce the level of trust that people have to place in each other and significantly reduce the ability of any centralized entity to exert authority or control over that network. One of the most well-known examples of decentralization would be Bitcoin. And this feature is the key reason why it's so valued amongst the crypto community and tech geeks. No single entity can stop you transferring Bitcoin to another person. Now, that might not seem like a big deal. However, a quick Google search will bring up numerous examples of people actually having their bank accounts shut down for the crime of buying Bitcoin. Even this year, HSBC, in all its wisdom, came out to say that it had just decided to ban all transfers between cryptocurrency exchanges and bank accounts in the UK. Now, I don't know about you, but I don't think it's fair that a company like HSBC can dictate what its customers can or cannot do with their money. Sure, when it comes to illegal stuff like transactions for terrible crimes like human trafficking, then I guess I'd be all right with that. However, buying Bitcoin isn't illegal in the UK. HSBC just thought to themselves they don't like Bitcoin, and because they obviously control all HSBC customer bank accounts, they had the ability to act like gods and just ban those crypto-related transfers. That, in a nutshell, is the problem with centralization. It also goes to show how it's easy for people or companies that control centralized systems to shut off those systems at will. The key benefit of cryptocurrencies like Bitcoin is that there is no CEO of Bitcoin Incorporated deciding that they don't like this crypto guy's merch designs and banning you folks from getting that sweet swag in my merch store. Link to that in the description if you appreciate my content and want to help me keep this channel completely ad-free. Anywho, now that you know what decentralization and centralization is, I want to move on to explain how damn centralized the current internet really is. Alright, so everyone watching this video has access to the internet and a device like a smartphone or a computer. I also imagine that the internet plays a pretty massive role in your lives. I'm guessing that pretty much everyone uses platforms like Amazon, Facebook, or Twitter. Yes, it's easy to see that the likes of Amazon dominate e-commerce. However, internet centralization runs much deeper. To understand that, I'm going to have to briefly explain how the current internet works. And the easiest way of doing that is probably by using an example. So, let's say you wanted to visit a website like Amazon to order that rowing machine to get in shape. Most of us just type in Amazon.com into our web browsers, land on the site, and don't think about it any further. However, behind the scenes, everything you see on that website is actually hosted on a server. Your computer or smartphone literally sends a request to that server to view the website. That request is known by nerds like me as a packet. Those request packets include core bits of info like the IP address of the server where the website is stored and your IP address. Routers, those boxes the likes of Virgin Media or Verizon send out to you, then send that packet from your computer to the server via fiber optic cables. That server could even be located on the other side of the world. Once the server gets your packet, it opens it up, reads your request, and splits up that data you need to view Amazon.com into a ton of different packets. Those packets contain information on how they should be put together and where they are from. Anyhow, those packets are sent by the server back to your computer using routers. Once your device gets them, they are put back together and allow Amazon.com to be displayed on your screen. Now, that is pretty incredible when you consider that the whole process takes around a second. But here's the major centralization problem with the current internet. Who controls all the servers? Well, that would be internet giants like Amazon Web Services and Alibaba. I mean, the likes of AWS host over 9 million live websites. That's 9 million websites that Amazon could decide to play God with. So, I hope you can now see how the current infrastructure of the internet is highly centralized. If you still don't believe me about how critical that server hosting is, then cast your minds back to the 28th of February 2017. Many of you probably had difficulties with or experienced outages for websites and services like Slack, Venmo, Trello, and tons of others whose websites went down. What caused all that? Well, it was due to a problem with Amazon Web Services servers in North Virginia. In other words, a slight problem at Amazon temporarily broke the internet. This centralization issue is also present in the Internet Routing or DNS system. Centralization in the DNS network can also lead to massive issues if their services go down. You need look no further than the numerous issues at Cloudflare, for example. This all helps illustrate a critical flaw with a centralized internet too. Then, of course, you have the problem of social media platforms like Facebook being so dominant in their respective niches. Have I made a baseless assertion there? Well, 2.6 billion people seem to be using good old FB. Twitter, on the other hand, has a slightly more modest 330 million monthly active users. The problem with these centralized platforms is that they are essentially walled gardens controlled by a CEO, a person who is heavily incentivized to generate top-notch earnings reports for shareholders in the next quarter. To make that happen, these businesses need to make even more money, and one key way of doing that is via ads. Here's the truth. If you don't pay for the product, you are the product. Do Facebook and Twitter charge you to use their service? Nope, they do not. Instead, they collect data on you and collect ad dollars from companies to make them more discoverable on the platform to the audience demographics they want. What that means is that we're actually losing access to content we want due to the over-monetization and centralization of these platforms. Centralization also means that regular internet users, like you and me, have lost control over our data. Instead, it is controlled by these data barons, which is a bit of a security and privacy concern. One of the biggest data barons of them all is a company called Equifax. And in 2017, they suffered one of the biggest data breaches ever. Hackers stole the personal information of 143 million US customers. That included data like social security numbers, dates of birth, addresses, and in some cases, driving licenses. Pretty much all the information needed to commit identity fraud. This is one of the most egregious frauds out there, and it allows the crooks to do things like take out a credit card in the name of one of the affected people and destroy their credit rating. On top of all that, there's the problem of these tech giants just deciding to completely ban you from their platforms based on what you say, known as deplatforming. Put it this way, I would personally be devastated if I got banned from Twitter. Also, earlier this year, we saw a bit of a hullabaloo caused by WhatsApp updating its privacy policy, which saw tens of millions of users move from the popular messaging app to alternatives like Signal and Telegram. So, what was all the fuss about? Well, that privacy policy was widely misinterpreted to mean that WhatsApp would be sharing personal data with its parent company, Facebook. Yes, the idea of some dimwit at Facebook snooping in on your WhatsApp chats could be pretty scary. But what many people don't bring up is the data that centralized platforms like Facebook have been harvesting from us for years. We have no control over it or how it's used in a way that could endanger the lives and privacy of many people around the world. So, let's explore that, shall we? Now, I'm not going to sugarcoat this, but there are plenty of people out there who go to great lengths to separate their online personas and their real-life identities. Think ladies and gents of the night, political activists, and undercover police, to name a few. The problem with using a centralized platform like Facebook was exposed by some workers in the world's oldest profession. They basically discovered that some of their clients were recommended by Facebook's People You May Know feature, and vice versa. What's worse is that many of these nighttime workers had only given Facebook their real identity. Yet somehow, Facebook had managed to recommend a bunch of clients to sex workers as friends. That basically means Facebook was outing these people's real identities to their clients as well. Now, Facebook hasn't exactly been forthcoming about how the People You May Know feature makes recommendations. However, we can be pretty certain it is down to the harvesting and processing of data. The point is that algorithmic black boxes owned by centralized businesses are kind of creepy, and for some people it could lead to harassment, stalking, and could actually be a matter of life and death. All that is particularly salient when we consider that we're living in an age where you can weaponize personal data against people. Are these platforms now so big that they are a utility and not a luxury that can be just switched off? The secretive nature of how Facebook collects and processes that data is certainly worrying, to say the least. So, now that you know how centralized the current internet is and the problems that can arise from that, I need to move on and explain how decentralization can help. One of the major goals amongst blockchain startups in cryptocurrency is to build a decentralized version of the internet where it is immensely difficult for any single entity to gain control. A system that all users can immediately verify and immediately trust. Blockchain is able to achieve that thanks to the network being spread out across lots of different nodes. This is commonly known as Web 3. So if these blockchain pioneers can pull it off, gone will be the days of personal data collection. Data collected that cannot be controlled by the users themselves, and data which is sold to advertisers or stolen by hackers. Another cool thing about Web 3 is that money would be native to the internet. So instead of having to rely on traditional financial infrastructures like banks and all the restrictions that come with them, people could transact quickly, globally, and in a permissionless manner via cryptocurrencies. That in itself could spawn new business models and economies overnight. A great example of this is Basic Attention Token and the Brave browser, which flips traditional advertising on its head by rewarding users with value for viewing ads. One major challenge facing those pioneers trying to make Web3 become a reality is migrating data storage away from the likes of Amazon Web Services. That's actually a problem being solved by the likes of Filecoin, and I've actually done a deep dive into that in this video over here. With Filecoin, websites would not have data stored on servers owned and controlled by AWS. Instead, peer-to-peer storage would be created amongst individuals themselves. That lack of a single point of failure would also mean that disrupted internet service like that seen in 2017 would be a thing of the past. It would also mean that governments like China's wouldn't be able to censor the internet or suppress democratic protest by literally switching off the internet in their country. And that is not some dystopian nightmare. It really happened in countries like Egypt during the Arab Spring protests in 2011 and was used recently during the military coup in Myanmar a few weeks ago. The cool thing about Filecoin is that anyone could become a data storage provider, and that service wouldn't be reserved for conglomerates. A much fairer system, if you ask me. Another cool project making waves in the area of Web3 is Definity, which aims to deliver a blockchain-based cloud computing solution to bypass the control of the likes of Amazon and Microsoft. They aim to do that by creating a global blockchain network with independent data centers that allow apps to run right on top of the network itself. So yes, no data centers full of servers owned by a single company. What's interesting is the fact that even Jack Dorsey, the CEO of Twitter, one of the biggest centralized platforms, thinks that decentralization is a good idea. And this is not just empty words spoken by some enlightened, beardy CEO. Twitter has actually spearheaded an initiative called Blue Sky, which aims to create a, quote, open decentralized standard for social media. So, if even Twitter's top brass think that decentralization is the future of the internet, then the chances are that this seismic shift from a centralized internet to a decentralized one is just a matter of time. What I find fascinating to think about is what all this means for those data barons and gigantic tech companies that dominate e-commerce and the internet today. If you believe in Web3 coming to pass, then you might want to reconsider those tech stocks. It could also usher in a world where people like you and me actually have control over our data. We will no longer be forced into a position where we have to trust that these big multinationals will protect it against hackers for us. Also, we may enter a world where you don't have to view ads if you don't want to, and content creators like me don't need to live in fear of being banned. A better and fairer world, if you ask me. But the future of decentralization extends further than just the internet. It also covers something that makes the world go round, and that would be money. Let's take a look at that. All right, so when was the last time that you used a bank card or PayPal to pay for something? I bet it was in the last 24 hours. What all these traditional payment methods have in common is that they are all highly centralized. Most people just use that Visa card and don't think too much about it. The problem with this system is that payment providers like Visa or banks like HSBC can deny service to anyone they want. That means your bank could just say, "You've bought crypto. We don't like that, and we're going to exclude you from banking with us," or, even worse, freeze all your funds. Things get even more alarming when you look at countries like China. Basically, if you're a business or financial institution over there, you have to do whatever the Chinese Communist Party says. That includes sharing things like user data and personal information. So, if you live in China, then you can be damn sure that the good old CCP could get all your transaction data if they wanted it. But why does that matter? Well, if you think democracy is a good thing and took part in those Hong Kong protests a while ago, then the Chinese government could work out if you attended that protest by looking at your transaction history. It would be as simple as seeing if you had bought a train ticket to an area where the protests were happening. That's actually why so many protesters used cash to pay for public transport. Then you have the issue of payment providers being like gods and dictating which businesses can succeed and which ones they're going to refuse to serve. A recent example of this is Visa and MasterCard deciding to stop allowing their cards to be used for Pornhub payments. Now, I don't want to get into the why of this move. What's more important is the fact that these companies have the ability to do this at all. Should it really be up to Visa and MasterCard to decide which businesses are able to succeed? So, what did Pornhub do? Well, they started accepting crypto payments instead. What's really interesting here is how decentralized cryptocurrencies can change the way we think about money, as we would no longer need to use banks or centralized payment solutions. Instead, all that value is distributed via crypto and blockchain tech. That means that decentralized cryptocurrencies can be used to send value to anyone in the world without the permission of some centralized financial entity run by some dude in a suit. It also protects regular people from getting their funds seized by governments wanting to raise money to fund a bailout. A bit like what happened to savers in Cyprus in 2013, when the government helped themselves to 10% of people's savings overnight. The case of Cyprus is particularly salient, with most of the world's governments racking up debt like there's no tomorrow, all thanks to the pandemic. But wait, you might say, not everyone has access to the internet or a bank account. So surely those sorts of people won't be impacted by this decentralized future that's upon us. Well, I'm not so sure about that. Unless you're a subsistence farmer, then the chances are you rely on global supply chains to get the things you need. Last time I checked in my local supermarket, there were foods from literally all over the world. Then you have products like iPhones, which require a number of things, including raw material inputs from all over the world, cheap labor in certain countries to protect Apple's profit margins, and for those phones to be shipped to all corners of the globe. All the logistics behind that make for a ton of record keeping. Blockchain can greatly improve the efficiency of those supply chains by making them faster and more cost efficient. They can also enhance the traceability of the products and improve the coordination of all the different businesses involved in the supply chain. The reason why is that every transaction in a supply chain involves information flows, inventory flows, and financial flows. The problem is that even the best supply chain management software cannot reliably connect the three different flows. That makes it more difficult to eliminate errors and resolve supply chain conflicts. If you want more information on how supply chains can be made more trustworthy and efficient through blockchain tech, be sure to watch my recent video, link in the top right. Now seriously folks, I cannot stress how important that supply chain transparency is when it comes to validating whether a product is genuine or not. Just days ago, a man simply referred to as Kong was arrested for selling millions of dollars worth of fake vaccines. Even worse, some of that counterfeit product was shipped overseas to be used God knows where. With more transparent supply chains powered by blockchain tech, it simply would not be as easy for counterfeit products to be passed off as genuine. I think we all agree that is something we would all look forward to in the future. So, what other sectors could decentralization really shake up in the near future? Well, identity management is one. Let's take a look at that now, shall we? The truth is that verifying your identity today can be bloody annoying. If you're forgetful like me, then you've probably pitched up at the post office to pick up a parcel and been sent packing, because you've forgotten to bring photo ID. Believe me, I've done it more often than you could believe. Then you have ID verification for things like online banking or that Instagram account you're building up. How are you verifying your identity there? Well, with a password. Now, I don't think I need to tell you how annoying that is and how it's super easy to forget which password you've used for what. The reason why you need all those different passwords is because traditional businesses are siloed, and that means identity is also siloed. This is why you have dozens of accounts for different services and a multitude of usernames and passwords. However, in a decentralized identity framework, the user receives all their credentials like driver's license, health records, government ID numbers, university qualifications, etc., and you get to store them in a digital wallet. The user can then use that wallet to prove their identity to any company that asks for it, and the company can verify that the piece of ID information is correct via a blockchain-based ledger. So, if decentralized blockchain-based IDs were a thing, then you would be in control of all that ID information, and you would get to choose who you share it with. Even better, you wouldn't have to walk around with wads of documents or have to remember numerous passwords anymore. Instead, you might just scan a QR code on your phone to prove that the person accessing that service is you. Much easier, right? Now, that ID problem is one that currently plagues DeFi and is one of the major reasons why every crypto loan I have seen is over-collateralized. I've actually covered a pretty interesting project that is tackling that ID problem in a decentralized way. You know where to get that good stuff. All right, folks, that's about it for today. But I do want to make like Jerry Springer and share a few final thoughts. You've learned how the world we live in right now is highly centralized and about some of the concerns that stem from that. People are only just beginning to wake up when it comes to the dangers of centralization, and the recent WhatsApp debacle certainly showcases that concern. Now, I know Saxo Bank likes to make a few outlandish predictions every year, but this one is a doozy for 2021. Amazon buys Cyprus to avoid regulatory intervention and sets up its HQ there as an EU country. That's a win for heavily indebted Cyprus and a win for Amazon, as they literally own a country. Maybe Jeff Bezos would get diplomatic immunity into the bargain. But here's the thing, with Amazon's current market cap sitting at around $1.65 trillion and Jeff Bezos' personal wealth being a cool $182 billion, is it really that crazy to think that Amazon could buy a highly indebted country whose annual GDP sits at just $25 billion? If all that came to pass, it would certainly usher in a new layer of centralization that we've not seen since the East India Company. A scary thought indeed. If you're like me and believe that the era of decentralization is upon us, then you might want to check out all those cryptocurrency projects I've mentioned. Links to all those videos are below. So, now I need to hear your thoughts. Do you think this decentralized future will come to pass? Have you got any questions for me? Hit me up in the comments. Also, I should probably let you know about my socials page. Hit that link in the description and you'll learn where my Instagram, Twitter, and podcasts are. Here I share a bunch of content that you won't find on YouTube. Finally, if you liked this video, then be a legend and smash that like button. Also, don't forget to subscribe and make that little bell sing on the way out. Guy, over and out.